Well, g'day folks, and welcome to another video. This is the wrap-up video for the big trip that I did on this bike. So you probably will have seen the 4-part series that I've done crossing the Simpson Desert. This is the summary of all the things that happened on the trip in terms of the bike and the gear and bits and pieces, technical stuff that people tend to want to know about. I'll try to split it up into different sort of chapters. So if you get a little bit bored with one subject, you can just skip ahead to the next one via the chapter markers in the timeline down below. One of the big questions is, why did we abandon this trip? Fair question. We've gone all this way, we've sat around for a few days waiting. Why not just wait a bit more? Well, we kind of ran out of time, I suppose, is the short answer. So we had the rig road to get across. Then we're going to do the Madigan line and a bit more tacked on the end if we had time. That was the mission for this trip. This is not like just a general adventure ride where maybe you can go somewhere else and do something else. That's what we had designed all our luggage for, all our food for. The cars were at a particular spot we had to get back to. People had certain time off work. Yes, if we'd hung around for another probably 2 days at Mount Dare, we would have been right. The clay pans would have dried out enough, would have been okay.
We saw that Madigan line where you were meant to be, Keith. Sorry, mate, you didn't make it. Should have just been a week later. Weather has been absolutely magnificent.
The reports we'd had from people who'd come from the north, which is the way we wanted to go, was that they'd had a lot more rain. Mount Dare had 12 mils, half an inch. Further north, the next sort of station up, they'd had 20 mils. I don't know what that is in inches. More. 3/4 of an inch. And that's the way we're headed. And there was a couple of 100 kilometres of clay pans that we had to get through. Now, yeah, riding in the sand, in the rain, or if it was wet, not a problem. But you had to get there. Also at the other end, at the Birdsville end, which was another big unknown. The rain that we could see on the Weather Channel was the whole area all the way across. There'd been flooding over at Birdsville. We just had no idea what was happening. That was a pretty tough decision for us. We're going to settle for the great 2-day ride that we did on the rig road and just head out of there. We'll talk about the gear. In the prep video that I did, I said I ended up with 36 kilos of gear on the back. Now that did include 6 litres of water. If we take out the 6 kilos of water, there's 30 kilos of gear that I had on the back. Now that is a lot. And there was a few comments about, you know, that's a lot of stuff. I'm going away for 4 weeks. Thanks Nerb and Tom. I'm not carrying that amount of stuff for a 4-week ride. How come you've got so much stuff? I kind of took that to heart. I did go through my gear and I got rid of 4 kilos of stuff. Little bits and pieces, you know, swapped out a heavy duty tube for a standard duty tube, got rid of, you know, a metal water bottle and used a plastic one instead. So a bunch of little bits and pieces. There's 4 kilos gone straight away. So I'm down to about 26 kilos. That's how I started this trip. And then on top of that, you add the water and you add the extra fuel. I'm not sure how I could have done this trip with any less, I have to tell you. Now there is about 5 kilos in the Mosko luggage system, which is a fair bit. I'll have a little bit more to say on the Moskos in a minute, but I'm just not sure how else I could reduce some of the stuff that I had to be any less than that. The weight on this bike was excellent. The way that that I had it all set up, like on the pannier system with the Moskos, it's all fairly forward. It's fairly centered over that back wheel. The weight's kept fairly low, and that was all pretty good. The weight in the fuel bladders, so yes, there's tank panniers on the side, but the weight is kind of where you want it to be anyway. If you had a bigger tank, it's kind of the same thing, if that makes sense. So the weight is in the right spot, it's at the right height. It's the same height as what a fuel tank would be. With all of the gear that I had on there, so 30 kilos of gear plus another 30 kilos probably of, you know, extra fuel, water in bladders and all the rest of it. That's a lot of weight on this bike, plus the rider. Even with all of that gear, the stock suspension, remember this is all stock springs, nothing done to valving or anything like that. Absolutely brilliant. I probably felt it bottom out twice. Somewhere in the desert, I remember it just, the tyre came up and hit the rear guard underneath. It was probably going a bit quick over something. But all the rest of it, fantastic. No issues at all with suspension. I'm not sold on the Mosko 40s anymore, I have to say. They are small. They are really compact and they force you to pack light, which is an excellent thing. If you went to the Mosko 80s, that's a much bigger unit. It's a much bigger system. That's a lot more stuff that you're going to be bringing. I think it's the kind of the way that they're set up. So there's 40 litres, but it's got these funky little pockets, right? So the pocket underneath, it's kind of too small really to be useful. And so I think if you just had one bigger open one, it would be better. You'd be able to use that space a bit better. For the next trip, I'm actually thinking of switching to the Giant Loop Mojave system. That's what my brother has. He runs that, and that's basically just one giant open system with dry bags stuffed in the top. So you can use it however you want. Now the other thing with the Moskos, and I know Nerb talked about this in his review that he's just done. He had some problems with the straps wearing through. I have had that before and I've had to replace the straps, but on my one, I've started to wear through the stitching underneath. And that sort of leads me to another point that this ride I found was really hard on bike and gear. I think it's the mud. It acts like a sandpaper and an abrasive paste, and it just wears stuff. So at the end of this trip, my sprockets, chain and sprockets were trash. They were just all rusted and the chain was unrecoverable. It was brand new before this trip, but it was trash. It went in the bin. The air filter got some sort of slimy paste stuff on it. Must have been the mud somehow. Never cleaned off properly. Into the bin. The plastics on the side covers, these all just got ground down as well. Rubbed and rubbed and rubbed. Thankfully, plastics kits for the 500 are really cheap, $200, all new plastics. So she's looking pretty good at the moment. We'll talk about fuel economy. So in the first video, I was really struggling. I actually ran out of fuel about 30 kilometers out of where we were headed. And with some calculations, I worked out that this did about 19 kilometers per litre on that first day. Now that was a real surprise to me. I was counting on, probably 22, 23 kilometers per litre for that day. And so I didn't have any extra fuel. I thought it was well within the range of the 17 litres. Turns out it wasn't. Now what the difference was, well, it had a lot of weight on it. It had a little bit of extra bulk with the bags on it. It was missing the little windscreen. I wonder if that made a difference to the fuel economy, because the wind is just, hitting all of me now rather than being deflected up over me. And there was probably a bit of a headwind. So all of those things, I think, probably led to that 19 kilometers per litre range on that first day. Now we weren't going fast either. We were doing like 80, 90 kilometers an hour. And the second day, therefore, I was a little bit concerned about the fuel usage. Now I carried extra fuel, absolutely didn't need it, because what I ended up using was what I was thinking it would have been. I was calculating about 18 kilometers per litre in the sand across the desert. I ended up getting about 18.4 kilometers per litre. So it was pretty much spot on across the sand. Now, interestingly, the worst fuel economy of the whole lot was through the mud. It dropped to 17.7 on that day in the mud. The sprockets, I ran a 14 on the front, 48 on the back. Brilliant for all of the track that we did, like up and down the gravel roads, the Birdsville track and the Udendata track coming back, sitting on the speed limit, plus a bit more. No problem there. Also really good in the sand that we did. Obviously I didn't do it in the real sand, which is on the Madigan. That's like a lot more sand, a lot more deep sand. But for the stuff that we did, it was great. 14.48, really good. Really happy with that combination. The tyres lasted really well. Really happy with the MC360 front. Done 2,000 kilometres, hardly looks worn. Most of that was, gravel road stuff, really. But, there was 700 kilometres of sand, which is, and it was great. Excellent in the sand, not a problem. The Dunlop D606 on the back, also excellent tyre. No punctures, nothing. I ended up running 15 PSI in both front and back for the entire trip. I settled on that somewhere in the middle of the desert, put it down to 15 and just left it on that the whole trip. All the electronics that I run, so we ran the center intercom system on the helmets, connected to the Rhino that sat on the bars, and that was the UHF. So there was a couple of little times where we used the UHF to talk. We never used the helmet intercoms because we were just spaced out too far, but the UHF worked great. So I just ran the UHF connected to the little Bluetooth dongle, connected to my center, worked fine the whole trip. The Rhino unit also has the GPS on it, and that's what I used to navigate this whole trip. Again, it wasn't a real navigation intensive trip, clearly marked roads, very few turns, so that was never an issue with trying to navigate, and so that's why I only ran with the Rhino and not the 2 GPS system that I usually run. The two other things that were fantastic on this trip in terms of electronics was one, the Garmin inReach Mini, and two, the sat phone. The inReach Mini I would consider absolute bare minimum of what you need to carry, or a spot tracker, but the Mini, for its messaging capability, was absolutely sensational. That was great. A couple of the roadhouses out there do have some sort of coverage depending on the carrier. Mungarani had Optus, but no Telstra. Unadata has both now, I think. But Mount Dare, where we've spent 2 days, 3 nights, they had nothing. Like, they do have a payphone, but it was not working. Therefore, you're sort of stuck. And they don't have internet coverage that you can use. So we used the inReach Mini just to send messages to everyone. Like, everyone in the group was using this to send messages back to their family and friends. And then a few people made phone calls on the sat phone as well. Both fantastic pieces of equipment to have in the outback, for sure. I really missed the screen, actually. Now, I had a couple of questions about why did I take the screen off. One was for safety. I've seen, people when they go over the bars, that screen will come into their helmet, clock them in the face. Not nice. If I'm going to go over the bars, it's probably going to be in the sand. It's happened before, so I didn't want that. So that was a safety issue. But the other thing was just I wanted to maximize airflow. Done this trip before, got really hot, wanted the maximum amount of air, so that's why I took it off. It was a bit cold, especially sitting on the 2 main gravel tracks that we did. You get a bit cold after a few hours, so I really missed it. At the end of the day, like literally, not just a saying, I felt really fresh on this, and you can see that in this little clip here. So it's about 4 o'clock Arvo. Yeah, we just got to keep a bit of an eye on people. Some people are getting a bit worn out. I'm pretty good still. But yeah, not everyone is. See how we go. I'm really enjoying this. 4 o'clock in the afternoon, other guys are getting tired, they've had enough. I'm just ready to roll, right? I'm really happy with how it's all handling. I'm having a great time. And I just reckon it's the lighter bike. Like, these other guys were on bigger bikes. The DR650, the KTM 690s, they've all got, 40, 50, 60 kilos more weight than this. And just, getting belted around all day with all your gear as well, it just adds up and it just wears you out. But I was having a great time on this. The grip puppies are great, seat was great, really comfortable. Wouldn't hesitate to do this again on this bike. There's actually only 3 problems that I had. Here's a little clip where I talk about the bladders. Thoughts about the 500. So far, this little spine clip, wobbling a lot. So yeah, that needs to be tightened up somehow. The bladders when they are full, like I'm talking 12 litres full, they are really hard to get to the brake and get to the gear lever on the other side. Now I took about 4 litres out at lunchtime, put it in the tank, and just having that 4 litres out makes a massive difference. So something to be aware of. If you can get away with a bit less in these, do it, because it makes it a lot more user-friendly. Yeah. The first time that I did fill these up, I had to stop and reposition them because I couldn't even change gears. I couldn't get my boot in and move my foot enough to change gears. I had to move these as far forward as I can, and that's probably the one thing I would change if I did this again, is just try and work on pushing these bladders, the fuel bladders, further forward. Other thoughts on the fuel bladders? Yes, it's a pain, but it has to be done for this bike. I actually ended up needing about 40 litres for for the 700 kilometers that we did. You've got 17 in the tank, you have to carry the rest somehow. So bladders are just a way of life if you're going to do that sort of trip on this bike. It's not ideal, it gets in the way, it's bulky, it makes the bike feel, you know, unwieldy, but as things go along and the fuel load reduces, the bike gets a lot better. So there's two problems, the bladders, the little clip, the little spine clip, I'll have to look at that and see if that's worn or what's going on there. And the third problem was just the little mirror.
Fold out mirror, hit that tree, landed here.
I'll glue that back in. But that was it. They were the only three issues that I had on this bike for the whole trip. You know, no problem, no tyre problems, no electronics, no, just nothing. It was just great, really, really good. So thanks for sticking around to the end of this. If you've made it this far, well done. I've just got nothing but praise for the KTM 500. I reckon it is a fantastic adventure bike. Yep, luggage is a bit of a, you know, it's a bit, you got to think pretty long and hard about how you're going to carry your luggage or what you're not going to bring, more to the point. You've got to sort out your fuel and you've got to work that out. But if you can get those right, this is a really, really good base for a light adventure bike. You are fresh at the end of the day. You can easily pick this up if you drop it. It really is a good bike. Well done, KTM. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, ride well, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.